ሰላም ተመልካቾቻችን እንኳን ለብላክ ሂስትሪ ማንትና ለ35ኛው የአፍሪካን ዩኒየን መሪዎች ጉባኤ በሰላም አደረሳችሁ አደረሰን። እዚህ ጉባኤ ላይ የሚታረጉት ነገር የሚደረጉትን የሚወሩትን ነገር ወደ እናንተ እናመጣለን ማለት ነው። በቅዳሜ እዚሁ ጠብቁን። አርስ ቴሌቪዥን። ስሜ ሚለን አብርሃም ይባላል።
For giving me the floor, and dear members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon or good morning to you all. I will first of all start by this media briefing by wishing you and your family a happy healthy, let me say happy and a prosperous New Year 2022. The last, as we all know, that the last 2 years have been very difficult for us. We changed our own, way of doing things, and contact. Any progress with the media, it was impossible to do it physically. Thank God we really took the risk, because we cannot just, stop like this and look at this pandemic, taking our lives. So we need to adapt ourselves to the scene. We are talking today more about resilience. We have to build resilience on human capital as well for this pandemic, so that life continues, because we cannot stop. It's a process. We have already lost about 2 years, and I think this is a time for us to come up and see how we can really tackle this invisible enemy that we are all facing. So with this, like the moderator said it rightly, as you know, this department, after the reform, has got 2 directorates. So it will be unfair for me to be here to share with you our information, what the African Union Commission is doing, without really looking at the 2 aspects, because it's a nexus, all is connected. We have the nexus of conflicts, climate change, and hunger on the continent. This is really a reality that is happening in our continent, and we need to address it, collectively with all our member states, both at the regional level and at the national level, so that we can mitigate all these effects of conflicts, hunger in Africa, and climate change. So that is why we say we picked for the agriculture, because we have 2 directorates, one directorate for agriculture and rural development, and the other one, it is the directorate of sustainable blue economy and sustainable environment. So let me briefly talk to you about what are the milestones we did in terms of the first directorate, which is the one related to agriculture. So that's why we say rebuilding resilience food system in Africa post-COVID-19, and a call for action. Immediately, our life stopped in 2000, and the pandemic came in March. We started also reflecting to avoid the sanitary crisis to become, a food crisis. So we try to avoid this type of thing, but unfortunately, the system, the distribution chain was disrupted on our continent, because of the measures our government and the other states, they took to mitigate the propagation of the COVID-19. So this department was also concerned, and we were called by our chairperson that we should not just concentrate on sanitary, issues. We have to look at the impact of this COVID in all the sectors of life. Like we have tourism, we have agriculture. How is it affecting, with COVID? Because most of this industry were paralyzed. People were at home to prevent the contamination. That is why we said we at the department, we called for the meeting with partners, FAO, which is our really strategic partner, to see how we can start working also to mitigate hunger in Africa, or the crisis of hunger, in Africa. And then we call for a meeting, a ministerial meeting in the department to hear from our ministers of agriculture, how are they doing, how is the sector doing, what are the challenges they are going through with the pandemic. And we came out with a very clear declaration on what's supposed to be done in order to ensure that our citizens still have access to food. Because COVID-19 also taught us that the more when you are in an undernourished situation, and if you are contaminated by COVID, you are fragile. You are very vulnerable. So that is why we really wanted to avoid it, because we had already had a lot of undernourished people on our continent. Before COVID, we were about 250 million people that were in this status of undernourished and hunger. But with COVID, these 2 years, 30 to 40 million people came to add the same situation, the situation of malnutrition, hunger and malnutrition on the continent. So today we have about 270 to 280 million people living under hunger on our continent. And this is because of the COVID. So what I'm saying, 30 to 40 million were added by this situation of the pandemic. That is what we are really doing. So what are the call for action? You know, when you have this type of statistics, like I said, the first one is the Ministers of Agriculture. So in our declaration of Ministers of Agriculture, a lot of game changing were identified for us to really mitigate this thing. The time is short, I cannot enter into detail, but there is this declaration, the African Ministers of Agriculture Declaration, and the call, you know, there is a call to call for another meeting whereby we have to work in a coordinated manner. So they said that, okay, agriculture has this problem of production. We are producing, we cannot, you know, the supply chain has been disrupted. How can we best, you know, address this issue, you know, of the food with other sector? So we associated the sector, the ministers of trade, because our, you know, our products are commercialized. It's for commercial purpose. It's trading. So we call the ministers of trade, and we also call the meeting with the ministers of finance. As many of you will know, this is a poor child of the economy. African governments do not invest much in agriculture. And we have this challenge, whereas agriculture is the backbone for African economy and for Africa's socio-economic transformation. We cannot doubt it. We cannot have 70% of our population being rural and practicing agriculture to feed our people, and we are not receiving investment on the sector. So that is why we called the minister, and we had a second ministerial meeting, which is the tripartite ministerial conference with the ministers of agriculture, trade, and finance. And we came out also with a very substantive declaration in order to speed up all this. So what will we say? All these two ministerial meetings, we have the instruments, they're there. So another milestone we also had is the advantage of having the Food System Summit that was called by the Secretary General of the United Nations, the food system. And this food system, we also worked with our member states, and we took those declarations as a baseline for us to have an African common position to review our food system on the continent. And then we worked with NEPAD and some other agency, UNECA. They joined us on that building, elaborating the African common position. And we also worked with our member state, because each member state was making consultation to, to put an input on this the global food system that was realized last year in June in New York. This African common position came out with 53 game-changing solutions, but it's enriched our former declaration, because we based on the declaration, and we took the COVID situation, we contextualized in the actual situation to put our own African common position. The first version of, we call in July our ministers, our STC, the Special Technical Committee, to come and endorse our African common position, which was very rich because there were consultation with all the stakeholders, the farmers, the association, farmers association, everybody was involved. So the first version, we presented it during the pre-summit that took place in July in Rome. It was His Excellency President Kagame, in his capacity as the coordinator of NEPAD, that had the honor to present our African common position. And for your information, that people that think that Africans are not working, we are working because we're the only region globally to present a common position. We came out, we talk in one voice, and that is really very important for us because our problems are the same, and we try to, put ourselves on the same page, all the 55 countries in Africa, and it was so done. And then in September, we presented it. I presented on behalf of the President, Tshisekedi, who is the President of African Union. In New York, I presented the African Common Position, which is endorsed there at the UN. So it is really a legal instrument that we can base to solve the problem of this thing. And the last one I want to share with you, it is our CADEP, the third edition of our biannual review report. So when we are talking about ending hunger, all this, we have the Malabo Declaration. And in our Malabo Declaration, we also have what we call the 10 years action plan for the implementation of Agenda 2063. And then, so we every 2 years, we start evaluating member states to see if they are really on track, if they are making progress on the implementation of the 7 commitments of the Malabo Declaration. I think all of you are familiar with the 7 commitments of the Malabo Declaration: ending hunger, invest in agriculture, ending poverty, tripling inter-African trade, build resilience, and mutual accountability. This is the report that you are going to submit it on the 5th, that is at the Assembly on the 5th, for adoption of our head of state. It has been adopted by our STC. That is concerning agriculture. I hope I'm not too long. Yeah. That is concerning agriculture. Those are the 3 instruments that are there. A call for action is to tell our, you to help us also, popularize all these 3 instruments and say that African countries should start implementing. We should start implementing because everything is there. It's just a matter of implementing all these 3 declarations or decisions that Africa took so that we can solve the problem of hunger and food security. The second one, the second aspect is I want to brief you on climate change. Green, I will be very, very quick here. Green, I can, after, share the document with, with you so that I will get more questions from you than me talking. And I will brief you on climate change, green recovery plan, and progress towards operationalizing the multi-hazard, multiple system. In terms of climate change, as we know, we have the Paris Agreement, and we are going forward of implementation of our NDCs. But finance is the core issue, challenge that our member states are facing. Some governments, they spend 2 to 5% of their national budget on adaptation actions. So there are a lot of climate action our government are doing. When you look at globally, Africa has only 4% of the responsibility of pollution, comparing to Brazil, comparing to the US, comparing to China, India, and the whole EU. So we don't have much responsibility, but we don't want also to say we are not part of it, because this is our planet. What type of planet are we going to give the next generation? That is sustainability. That is why we are on it. We have our NDCs, but our NDCs, majority of our NDCs is on adaptation. And adaptation in agriculture, because we need to feed. So you see the nexus between one issue and another. If we look at this climate change, what are the sectors more affected? It is agriculture. We are talking about the economic sector. It is agriculture. because we have floods, we have the drought, we have flood, we have cyclones, all this, and we have desertification, and we have insects. Here we had these desert locusts, and we had the fall army worm. Fall army worm has never entered our continent. It was in Asia, but because of the climate changing and the pattern of the climate, it created a favorable environment for the insects to survive in Africa with our hot temperature, tropical hot temperature, but they could come and cause a lot of economic damages on production sector of our economy. So that is why, we really need to make sure that we mobilize finance to implement our NDCs, the National Determined Contribution, so that we will not pollute the world anymore. So there is another one, is the Green Recovery Action Plan. This Green Recovery Action Plan is due to the COVID-19. How do we come out of it? So we had, through the presidency of Britain, they had the presidency for COP26. So we were supported by them to elaborate a strategy or a plan of action. We did it. It was very successful, and it has 5 pillars. The pillars of this challenge, I'm telling you, like financing, mobilization of finance to do our adaptation or mitigation plans. We have also the renewable energy. And renewable energy is a big topic, but I will not enter. If you have questions, I will be with renewable energy. In renewable energy, we want efficient energy and accessibility, to access. If you're talking about digitalization, how can you digitalize when we don't have light? Which technology are we using? And we're also talking about the gas. This is very important, because Glasgow told us not to use gas and fossil. But gas is not as pollutive the way the fossil is. So why can't we use gas when our countries are discovering this wealth, these natural resources? So that's why we told them that, okay, we are going to clean energy, but we want a transition. Let us get investment to change from one pattern of energy to another, because we are not part of the global pollution. So we are saying just transition. And that is the second. And the third one, we say nature-based solution to keep our forests, our ecosystem, our lakes, our rivers, and our oceans. Management of all these ecosystems is very important for us. And the fourth one is resilient agriculture. So we can turn, but agriculture is just like peace and security. If you are addressing the problem of peace and security, you have to know the root cause. Why are we going to have peace? It's all this stress, water stress, all this pastoralism, transhumance that we have on the continent, all these are issues. So, and the last one is green cities, pollution. We have a lot of pollution, waste. How will we manage our waste? How will we manage the plastic, single plastic? We have done a lot, with our first ladies on the continent for the plastic. So, in terms of really, launching this initiative, now we are mobilizing funds in order to really remove the plastic, both here in the land and the ocean. And the last one is multi-hazard early warning system for early action. So when we had the cyclone Idai in Mozambique, in Mozambique, it affected Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. Our department, we came out, they said, but we don't have a capacity to assist our member states. What is the way forward? I took my stake and I went to Italy in NATO. NATO invited me to look at the problem of climate change, and I tabled it directly to NATO. And I told them we have problem. We don't have communication. We don't have information to give to our member state. We don't even have capacity of preparedness against all these hazards that is happening on our continent. So they came and they supported us. They mobilized money with the government of Italy, and they gave us, and we have it. I can invite you to go and visit. We have this station, how do you call that, situation room. Here in the old building, We launched it in December. This is really a milestone for us. Today we are in a capacity to assist both our RECs and our member states in terms of information, when a cyclone is coming and how people to do the early warning system and the early action that we have to take. I will tell you that today we have 16 countries in Africa that are acute hunger. They are living on an acute hunger. Some of them, I know it on the head, but I think it's also embedded in my presentation, which is we have countries like Nigeria, Angola, Mozambique, Somalia, Ethiopia, and, not Burkina Faso. There are about 16 countries that are really in acute hunger. South Sudan, all these countries are really suffering. Mostly Somalia. Somalia is really a problem because once you have hunger, you are destabilizing also the region because those people will go and look for their livelihood elsewhere. And we really need to take urgent measures. And we are working already with the African Development Bank because we have a fund for this emergency and the droughts and this. We are working with them to assist farmers to have access to seeds and all the agriculture inputs so that we can, overcome this issue of acute hunger. Now, the first question that was directed to me is how we can sustain food security without looking at small-scale farmers. I will also like to share with you, as you know, that the theme of the year proposed by the Republic of Cote d'Ivoire, it's about nutrition. But our African member states, they wanted it to be broader. The way you were saying, how can you ensure food security when you don't look at agriculture? We are producing what? Do we still want to put this country on import bills? I think we should say no. Because we have the youngest population, very active human capital that can do a modern, there was a question, how can we go to modern agriculture? A modern agriculture, because the youth, they are running away from all these background, like a hose and this. We also have initiative to remove the hose to the museum, empower women. All this, we have done it in this department during my mandate. So we say that it is, during our theme of the year now, it is building resilience on nutrition and food security in order to accelerate or to strengthen agro-food system. So there you can see we are really worried about what we produce. We don't want import foods because we have arable land. We have 60% of arable land worldwide. So this continent can feed itself and can feed Africa if we prioritize agriculture as the way forward for our industrialization, for our socio-economic development, for ending hunger, ending poverty. This is the biggest sector that provides opportunity. And I will go to the second so the theme of the year, we are going to address it very seriously on how to really empower our small-scale farmer. Because our farming in Africa is family farming. So it's not those big, huge plantations. They are small plantations. So those are the people that are producing. And their majority, 70% of our population, they're there. So we need to really address them, support them, bring technology and innovation for them to modernize their way of doing agriculture. What is the blue economy? We said we have potential. 38 countries in Africa are coastal. And we have island states like Seychelles, Mauritius, Comoros, Cape Verde. All these are islands. So we have this potential. So why don't we go and take this opportunity to unlock the potential that is there and also grow, and reduce poverty on our continent. So we have fishery, we have the transport marine, like the boats, all these containers. Is a huge industry, the blue economy. And our member states, they brought it on board. They say, why are we not talking of blue economy? So since we're reforming the department, the commission, so that's where this blue economy came, and they say, okay, since we are looking at the land aspect, the wealth we have with our natural resources on land, we also can look at the ocean and give this one to this department. That's why the department today has 2 directorates, because the blue economy is part of it. You can ensure food security and nutrition, because of fish is a very good source of nutrition, and you can reduce poverty, and you can empower women, because most of the African countries, women, they don't go to the fishing, but they sell fish. They are the ones that are in the end of the value chain on the commercialization of fishing is women. How are they fishing? What are the conditions they have? So we need to empower them. So the second one is about this climate change, the Great Green Wall. The Great Green Wall, it is our initiative, African initiative. Like we say, African problem to African solution to African problem. This is our head of states, I think in 2014, they brought up this idea of the Great Green Wall. And we started it in the Sahel because of all these Boko Haram, all the issues of terrorism, those groups that we have there. We want to bring life in those. And it was really very good. 70% as the journalist that asked me the question has been achieved, because we're able to plant trees and to bring those families back to their zone of origin. And this example, that is why we are not finishing. We were going to the phase 2 of the Great Green Wall. So the phase 2 of the Great Green Wall, because the intention, it was to plant from Cape Verde, Senegal, up to, I think, Djibouti. All Africa to have these, planting trees. So now we are going through the second phase in the, how do you call it, Southern African region, the SADC region, because of water stress. So that is why we have already, it has been approved. We are already working with SADC in order to bring the lesson learned from the Sahel to the SADC region. And today, it has got to the Great Green Wall Initiative has been an appetite for our partners. The UN today, they are mobilizing funds, and they're saying it is their initiative, where it is not their initiative. It is the African initiative, and they are mobilizing a lot of money. Last year, His Excellency, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, he attended the meeting of resource mobilization in Paris with President Macron, and they mobilized a lot. There is a promise of about $41 billion for this blue, the Great Green Wall, this initiative. There is the UN Convention for Desertification are there to get all this money to mobilize, because there was really a commitment to invest in the Great Green Wall. So it has become really a very, very important initiative that many organizations are trying to get, that Great Green Wall. We are not against it, because alone we cannot do, but we want more collaboration with the department. You cannot go and mobilize, and the owner of this thing, as we say scientifically, I can sue them to court for property right, because this is our property, African Union property. So the third question was African government investing. Yes, this CADEP started in 2003 when our head of state and government, they said that agriculture should be a priority, food security and investment. So we had the Maputo in 2003, the Maputo Declaration, which says we have to invest from our national expenditure, 10% in agriculture. When we say agriculture, we say the big A of agriculture. That is livestock, fishery, even environment. 10% of the budget, the national budget, should be accorded or allocated to agriculture. But they are not doing it. Our government are not taking their responsibility. They are not doing it. And when you look at the biannual review report, there is this indicator of the 10% to allocate in agriculture. If you look, I think this edition, the third edition, I think there are only 4 countries who are on track on that that indicator of 10% of the investment. So what do we do as a department? I myself, when I go on official mission at the member state, I try to involve with the parliamentarian. I go to the assembly and I discuss with them. And it's been having very, very good, image, understanding of this 10%. Because the first exercise I did, I think it was in Congo, the Republic of Congo. And when I went there, I was talking about this 10%, Congo, not RDC, the Congo Republic in Brazzaville. And I went to the parliament with the economic commission. And they were saying, how can we put 10% of the cake just in one sector? And I said, how many ministries do you have in that sector? You have Ministry of Animal Health, husbandry, you have the Ministry of Fishery. It's all those ministries we are talking about. So a clear information was there, and they are improving. They are improving. So anywhere I go, I went to Angola, I did the same thing in my country. They were questioning me why. I said yes. And I gave them all this thing. I said, when the head of state decide, I think, we should transform the decision of head of state into action, into programs, into plans, so that it can reflect on our people, so that we can really take Africa out of this misery. The last one is how to maximize agriculture. Well, we are trying to bring the climate-smart agriculture, the resilience, this food system, agro-food system resilience, and we are going to really take take opportunity of the new, the theme of the year to really speed up, because the 2 years of COVID also did not allow us to do much. We lost about 2 years just like this in apathy without doing anything. So I think we need to speed up, because we saw, and the COVID-19 gave us an opportunity to say, we have to change. Because when the people in West Africa needed to import rice, to import rice in Asia, Asia has blocked, they have canceled their exports. So where is the sovereignty? We need to have the sovereignty, food sovereignty in the continent. That is why we have an initiative which we call CAP, the Agro Park. In each region, we want to bring the Agro Park with the key commodity products that we consume. Like we have cereals, like maize, cassava, rice, livestock, milk, all these, So we want to have the Agro Park in all these things. We are working on it. We have Afrexim Bank that really bought in that initiative, and we are working on the Agro Park and taking the opportunity of the African Free Trade Area to really commerce in these corridors. And the last one is climate change agreement. We are still fighting to really implement the Paris Agreement. This agreement was adopted in 2015, which here we now. Up to now, we are not going. So we are going to have COP27. And COP27, we want to showcase. I will invite you, I don't know if you have access. We are going to have just in about less than 1 hour, we are going to have a side event. The Egyptian government, they are going to host this COP27. It's going to be an African COP. They are going to share with us what type of, programs they want it to be, how they are going to organize it, this year in November. I thank you.
So there's a question about not just growing, but growing properly, right? Sustainability. You guys talked about security a lot and sustainability, and you were talking about the youth. So as part of, for us as media, we want to be able to open the space for you guys to really send out that message. So what would you say to the youth that are steering away maybe from understanding that agriculture and farming is really the way, and really bringing them back and showing how sustainable and how much of a big business it could be?
If we have good models to present to the youth, like we are talking about agribusiness. The agribusiness is a new model. So what type of model? And when you're talking about agribusiness, you have the framework, but you need to have a conducive environment, access to finance, access to land, those are the type of reflection, or package you need to ensure. That is the government. Each one knows his duty. At youth, he has a program. He wants to plant, oranges, after to transform and make orange juice. So the government should give him opportunity to go to the bank and get a loan, a microfinance loan, so that this person can grow. That's the way it's done, because otherwise, where will he get, the finance, investment for him to do his own business? So those are policies that at the national level, the government, the politicians have to look at it if we want to progress.
Yeah. Fantastic. There's another thing that you mentioned, which is food sovereignty, right? And there are a couple of African countries now that have said, no, we're not going to export, only to import our own stuff at double and triple the price. So what can you say to other African countries as a means of encouraging this already started sort of trend?
We need to encourage. That is why our theme of the year is important when we are talking about agro-food system. Because food system is a global word. In those days, our policy makers, they used to say food system. When you talk about food system, you are saying you can buy food in Asia, in Europe, and you ensure that the population are feeding. But when you say agro-food system, you have to look at the agricultural segment. Produce and then go to the system, the entire value chain. So that is where we want to reach. I know it's a big debate because you are trying to remove market for these multinational companies like Nestle, all these. But if they have Nestle there, why can't we have Nestle here? Why can't we have our own capacity? Mostly today we have a big tool, which is the IFCFTA. We want to trade. And if trade brings a lot of income, it reduces poverty. Those are the activities that you can reduce poverty. So I think that is the way forward. Food sovereignty, it will be an agenda that will be very difficult, even the policymakers to do. Because some government, they prefer to import, and we know what is behind it, what agenda is this. But we don't want to import because we have the opportunity. Countries that import, because they don't have access to good land, fertile land, pastoralism, they don't have good water sources for the animal to feed themselves. So, but many countries in Africa, we do have it, and let us go through it. This is Agenda 2063, combat hunger and poverty. And make sure that the food we are giving our people are nutritious. That is why the theme of the year is complementary. Because you produce, but you don't just produce. Like our people, our farmers, they just eat like this. They don't have a nutrition component, or idea that what they have to eat. A pregnant woman, she has to know what she has to eat so that she can have a good milk to breastfeed the child, and she can have good food for her to sustain the 9 months pregnancy. Those are the ideas we are having in this the theme of the year. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. ተመልካቾቻችን እንደምታዩ ተመልሰናል ማለት ነው። አሁን የምንገኘው እዚህ የአፍሪካን ዩኒየን ዋና ሄድኳርተርስ ውስጥ ነው። ይሄ ሁለተኛ ቀናችን ነው እዚህ ስንመጣ። ሁለተኛ ቀን ላይ ደግሞ በደንብ የሰማናቸውና የተረዳነው ነገር ምንድነው? ስለ ኒውትሪሽን፣ ስለ ግብርና፣ ስለ ምግብ ነው ዋና አንኳር ሐሳቡ የዚህኛው የኤዩ ሰሚት አመት ማለት ነው። እና ከዛም በላይ ብዙ የተወራው ነገር መንግስት አካላቶችም ቢሆኑ አፍሪካን ዩኒየንም ቢሆኑ ስለ ግብርና ሞር እንዴት ነው የሀገሩን ሰው ኢንካሬጅ የምናደርገው የአፍሪካን ሰው ኢንካሬጅ አድርገን ከዛ በላይ ደግሞ ሰስቴይነብል የምንሆነው ወይ ደግሞ ራሳችንን መቻል የምንችልበት መንገድ ምንድነው ነው። ከዛም በላይ ደግሞ ትንሽ ሌላ የተወራው ነገር ብሉ ኢኮኖሚ ስለሚባለው ነው። እንደምታውቁት አፍሪካ ውስጥ ብዙ አይነት የውሃ ቦዲዎች አሉ። ስለዚህ እነሱንስ ደግሞ ለምንድን ነው ማንጠቀምባቸው? ምን ማድረግ እንችላለን? ኢኮኖሚያችን ከሱ ለምን እንደማይጠቀመው የሚሉት ነገሮች ተነስተዋል። ስለዚህ እሱን የተለያዩ ነገሮች ወደ እናንተ እናመጣለን ማለት ነው። እዚሁ ከኛ ጋር አርትስ ቴሌቪዥን ላይ ቆዩ። ስሜ በድጋሚ ሚለና ይባላል። ይሄ አርትስ ቲቪ ነው። First of all, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
Could you first introduce to our audience who you are, your position, and then we'll get to the questions.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Renea Wambeng. I am the global head for client relations at the African Export-Import Bank, which is a Pan-African development finance institution supporting trade and trade-related infrastructure across Africa.
Fantastic. So this is the third day of the meetings. What is the energy? How do you feel about the meetings and some of the main things that have been addressed at these meetings so far?
No, this morning we've had a very successful official opening of the 35th Ordinary Assembly of the African Union Heads of States and Governments meeting here in Addis, which has seen the handover of the chairpersons from President Antoine Tshisekedi of the Democratic Republic of Congo to His Excellency President Macky Sall, the incoming head of state. Amongst all the presentations we've heard this morning from the various participants, the President of the African Union, Honorable Moussa Faki, President Tshisekedi, Prime Minister Abiy, President Macky Sall, there are some themes that are cutting across, principally amongst the first one is peace and security on the continent. All the heads of states have condemned the anti-constitutional changes that are happening on the continent. They've condemned terrorism. They've lauded the work that the African Union is doing for the fight against COVID-19, the tremendous work done on the vaccines, and now the successful production of vaccines in South Africa, thanks to the leadership of President Ramaphosa. They've also talked about economic development of the continent, how we Africans have to take our own future into our hands, which is a common theme we have seen in the presentations of most of the heads of states. They've also mentioned the important issue of climate change, the transition to renewable energy, and how Africa needs to position itself. So on a global perspective, we've had very successful interactions from all the heads of states and governments who have made their presentations this morning.
That's true. There are so many important things that were mentioned. Something that was continually said is the Africa that we want, creating the Africa that we want. And whenever I think of creating the Africa that we want, the first thing that comes to mind is narrative and perspective. And so there was something that the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said about creating our own media, because the media is such a powerhouse in terms of setting an example of what we look like. So how do you feel about that statement?
That was a fantastic idea and initiative from Prime Minister Abiy. I think it is time that we have a common African media platform, very powerful media platform, to change the narrative. The narrative we hear today is about war, about famine, about drought, about insecurity. Nobody celebrates the good things happening on the continent. Nobody celebrates our integration. Nobody celebrates the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Nobody celebrates the young men and women in Africa who are doing fantastic things in the digital space, in technology, in the arts and the culture. So I think it is time that we get ourselves together to put together an African media platform that can actually change the narrative and the perception of the continent.
Fantastic. You're right. It starts with us. I know you are a little bit busy and you have to go, so I will leave you there. But thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
Madam, first of all, thank you so much for giving me your time. If you could introduce yourself and your position to our audience.
Okay. Thank you very much for interviewing me. My name is Eunice Ipinge from Namibia, and I'm a president of Pan-Africa Women's Organization, PAO, the organization that was formed by African women in 1962 before the then OAU. It gave birth to the OAU, now AU. So
you've been around for a while.
We've been around for a while, promoting women's issues, fighting for our continent. Our organization has fought for our continent's liberation and the apartheid discrimination, apartheid regimes. We fought for that. We fought for women issues, and now that we are still existing. Currently, we are a specialized agents of AU dealing with the women issues. But we have been around for quite a long time, and we are so happy now that we see women in the continent are mobilized, and we are still mobilizing women to participate in the development of the continent. We are here today, as you asked me about how I feel about this meeting. You see, for almost 2 years, since 2020, we have not been meeting face to face with people here like this. It's a moment of reuniting. We are so excited to see some faces that we used to see and the new faces that have come in to participate in the discussion and shaping of our continent. Like this year's theme is on nutrition and food security. They think that is the women more, is the women's domain that we are discussing with, and that's why it is more exciting for me as a president of Pan-Africa Women's Organization to see how our continent is looking at the issue of nutrition and food security, and also strategizing how we can mobilize women who are more on the area of food production and also nutrition. So it is more important for the women's movement to participate in this meeting and also to see the resolutions that will come out, which will increasing our energy to mobilize the African women to produce food and also to analyze the obstacle of African women to ownership of land and also technology, how to acquire new technologies to produce food and also to prepare food for the nutrition of our children. We are the ones who are taking care of the elderly, the sick, and the young ones. So we need to be empowered and capacitated in terms of nutrition and also access to resources like land. So we are observing, we are lobbying to influence our head of states to take the land ownership by women very serious. Thank you.
Sir, first and foremost, thank you so much for giving me your time. If you could introduce who you are and your position and your company to our audience first.
Thank you very much. My name is Mulu Alem Siyum. I'm the CEO of A-Trade Group. The A-Trade Group initiative is a social enterprise who is supporting under digital capacity building on small and medium entrepreneurs, particularly to the youth and women. This initiative is mainly in Africa that we identify 3 chronic areas to have a sustainable growth. And that is, 1 is the know-how to do business, 2 is affordable finance, 3 is soft and hard infrastructure. And the know-how to do business does not mean that Africa do not know how to do business, but what we see is over 95% of African businesses are being done with the traditional business. And the traditional business mindset is more flexible compared to competitive business mindset. And for that, we develop a program to support small and medium entrepreneurs. And one of them is changing the mindset to be competitive, changing the mindset aligning with their business plan. The second one is creating a continental marketplace where intra-Africa trade can grow, one country to another country exchanging, and more making available African product, made in Africa product. The third one is affordable finance, which today, this morning, we had a side event, and 3 head of state was participating in that. The government of Rwanda, Gambia, and Tanzania was participating to champion this digital finance. What is digital finance doing is specifically focusing for a new young entrepreneurs, new innovators, that where the startup challenge is that having the finance. So we came up with a mechanism that to support the small and medium entrepreneurs, particularly focusing the youth. So that is what was today the side event was.
Obviously, it's the way forward globally, but there's always a question of infrastructure when it comes to Africa. So how does that play into everything that you guys are doing?
Yeah, what I said, the third chronic area I mentioned to you earlier is the soft infrastructure and hard infrastructure. And the soft infrastructure is government policies, creating an enabling environment for small and medium entrepreneurs. On the digitalized world, whether we like it or not, in the next less than 10 years, 95% of trade is going to be digital. Government need to be ready for that. The private sector need to drive and showing that demand, and government creating that enabling environment for infrastructure to be built. Not just only the hard infrastructure, but the soft infrastructure where policies and regulatory framework that need to be worked on. And luckily, a number of government has a strategy, but at the ground, at the ordinary people, that how that can be really work. And that is what A-Trade Group is supporting and assisting under the capacity building.
Fantastic. So there have been a lot of discussions about really partnerships and how partners are necessary in building all of the goals that we have, especially when we're talking about the Africa we want to build. So that's really interesting that you guys are doing that, and thank you so much for the time that you gave me for the interview.
I thank you.
First of all, thank you so much for giving me your time. I know you're busy. If you could introduce to our audience who you are, your organization.
Thank you very much. I am Dr. Amenia Asfour. I am the president for the Africa Business Council. The Africa Business Council actually is established in line with the Decision Summit for promoting our intra-Africa trade, for operationalization of the Continental Free Trade Area, for empowering our African private sector. So it is the voice of the African private sector. And our founding vision is a competitive, borderless, innovative Africa for trade, industrialization, investment. Our members actually are from all over the private sector in Africa. That would include the regional business council, like COMESA Business Council, SADC Business Council, the chambers of commerce, like here the PACHI in Ethiopia, Pan-African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, are on our board. The West Africa Chamber of Commerce, East Africa, the Private Sector Federation, Union of Industries, Manufacturing Association, the women entrepreneurs, the youth entrepreneurs, the SMEs. So it's really about how the private sector comes under one umbrella to realize the Africa we want. If we're talking about a prosperous, peaceful, integrated Africa, driven by the citizens of Africa, we are the citizens of Africa. The private sector, the women entrepreneurs, the young startups, the small-scale farmers, the cross-border women traders, the large corporates, the SMEs, all these are comprised of the African private sector. So how can this African private sector play its role for the Africa 2030 development agenda? How can it is within the architecture of Africa Continental Free Trade Area? How can we really boost our intra-Africa trade? If we don't know about each other, if we don't manufacture our own pharmaceuticals, if we don't add value to our own natural resources, what are we going to trade among ourselves? So what we want to trade is a strong, competitive, value-added, standardized, made in Africa products. So in order to do this, we have the strategy, I call it the strategy of empowerment, which depends on three pillars. The first pillar is about private sector strengthening, including SMEs, women and youth. In Africa, youth are more than 60% of Africa are youth less than 30 years. How are you going to create jobs for them? How you are going to empowerment the women entrepreneurs, the SMEs, which is the backbone of the economy. So it's really about education, about training, about capacity building, about awareness, about education, letting them know what is existing on the continent. And the second pillar is about policy advocacy. What policies in place or legislation that will empower our African private sector? Financial inclusion is one thing. We have to have tailored financial products that is targeted for the small and medium enterprises, for women and youth, no collaterals. We need to have a digital financial inclusion. We need to empower African private sector by innovation, by financing their innovations, because we have a lot of youth on the continent, have a lot of innovation, a lot of ideas, they don't know where to go. So financial inclusion is a must. The second issue is really about the policies, the enabling environment of investment, of climate business, climate for investment, and what incentives. And then we also need special policies like government procurement. This is one thing that the Africa Business Council has advocated for, to have at least 40% for all government procurement across the continent geared towards African private sector. Because this is how we upscale the SMEs. This is how we give chance to our African private sector to grow and share in its economic growth. But in order to do this, we need to have a third pillar, which is the product. A good product, a competitive, a quality, a value added, and standardized. Because if we want to prefer an African product, it has to be standardized, it has to be matching the international standard. For instance, if we talk about agriculture, agribusiness, when I was the chair for Comesa Business Council, we had a project for local sourcing from local vendors, where the small-scale farmers, they have their products, they have their agricultural products. We wanted them to supply to big corporates, but the big corporates said, but this products has to meet the international standards, and that's how we trained every year more than 400 SMEs to meet the requirements of the international standard. You can find a lot of small-scale farmers that are growing a crop, but it is not matching the international standards. So the product of Africa that we want to trade should be up to the level of Africa. So it is actually a holistic approach of how we empower our African private sector, how we come all together as public-private sector dialogue, how the government and the private sector play its role in investment, in infrastructure, because also without infrastructure, without energy, there will no industrialization, no manufacturing. So it is really about mapping exercise, what is existing on the continent, how we add value it, how we have business linkages, how women entrepreneurs can with her mobile, with digital financial inclusion, trade with another woman in Nigeria, in Egypt, in Ethiopia, in South Africa. How can we have corridors from Cairo to Cape, from Lagos to Mombasa, from Dar es Salaam to Dakar? All this is actually a continental roadmap that Africa Business Council, under its umbrella, now we have technical committees that will really be in different fields like trade, like industry, like logistics and transport, tourism, mining, many agriculture, agri-processing, oil and gas. So all these technical committees is really to see how we gather the private sector from across the continent and make sure that they include SMEs, women and youth, and come together for the better and well-doing of our African continent, the Africa we want.
Especially now, post-COVID, a lot of countries' GDPs have been gotten lower. Obviously, our economies have been hit. And so would you say that it is an imperative time for the private sector and the public sector, or the government sector, have to be working together, really?
Of course, they have to be working together all the time. But as COVID was a real challenge, it was also an opportunity for many of the private sector. But unless you really tap into this opportunity, like for instance with COVID, with all this personal empowerment, like with masks, with all the hand sanitizers, with medical consumers and supplies, we found a very big gap in Africa, that we really need to build our capacity with reference to our vaccines, our pharmaceuticals, our medical consumer supplies, although there are some of those industries already on the African continent. Like for instance, in Egypt, there is about 400 factories for medical consumer supplies, but nobody knows about it, you know. Here in Ethiopia, you have very good leather industry, but it's not marketed and not branded under an international brand. So this is the kind of issue that we really need now to have digitalization, because we saw during COVID how the digital era is really boomed, how the digital economy could be done, how can you promote your products on the internet, and now everybody is looking to see how can we really promote our products on the digital platforms. Like for instance, we have our own digital platform called Sukuku, which is in Swahili called the Central Market, that with Africa Aid Trade Group, which is also on the board of Africa Business Council, and have launched the financial digital banking and smart financing, so that they are able on internet to make the payments. I mean, there is a huge potentials and opportunities for our private sector, for our youth entrepreneurs. They are all innovative to make their own their startups in digital economy in different aspects, but we need the business climate to empower them and to make incentives for them and to finance their innovations. You cannot find a bank now that finances innovations of the youth. If you go with an idea, nobody will finance it. This is the way we want to come in to see how we have a real fund for youth innovations, a fund for research and development to link science and technology with industrialization, to empower our youth and their innovations and make sure that Africa problems is dealt with Africa solution, and we empower our youth to create the good business climate for and incentives for realizing our dream of a prosperous, peaceful, integrated Africa.
Yes, ma'am. I love to hear it. And as you said, there is no shortage of the youth or innovation here in Africa. So thank you so much for giving me your time.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Have a lovely day.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
ተመልካቾቻችን ይሄው እንደምታዩት አንድ አይነት ነገር ነው ተመሳስለን የሰማነው ማለት ነው። በዚህ ስብሰባ ላይ የምንፈልጋትን አፍሪካ እኛ ነው የምንፈጥራት፣ ከዛም በላይ ደግሞ ለአፍሪካን ችግር አፍሪካ መፍትሄ ነው የሚያስፈልገው የሚለውን ነው ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ አብረን ስንሰራ ነው እሱን ነገሮች ማምጣት የምንችለው ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ እንደምታውቁት አፍሪካን ዩኒየን እዚህ ሲገኝም ከሁለት ዓመት በኮቪድ ምክንያት 2 ዓመት አልፎ ነው የተመለሰው ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ ይሄ ሜሴጅ በጣም አስፈላጊ ነበር ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ ይሄንን ደግሞ ወስደን እኛም ወደዚህ እንሰራለን ማለት ነው። ሚዲያም በጣም ትልቅ ቦታ ይዛል ይሄን ሜሴጅ እንዳሉት ለማስተላለፍ ለሰውም ለሌላውም ደግሞ ኦርጋናይዜሽኖች። ስለዚህ እሱን ይዘን እንሄዳለን ማለት ነው። በድጋሚ ይሄ አርትስ ቴሌቪዥን ነው። አብራችሁን ሆኖ